We had CPI come in at 8.5%, just 2% lower than everybody was expecting. And Bitcoin as a result went up a little bit more than 5%. And because of that, now everybody is starting to say that the bull market is back and the bear market is over. But just calm down and look at the data, because a lot of people have lost their minds. For example, Mr. Wonderful here says that there's not a recession going on right now. And if you don't think that there's a recession going on, then you're definitely drinking the government's Kool-Aid, because a recession is technically 2 negative quarters of GDP in a row, and we have had that. So we are in a recession, and I don't care what the hell they say. Whenever Kevin O'Leary talks about Bitcoin, I usually like what he has to say, because he's usually pretty bullish. And I want to be bullish with crypto as well. But whenever he's saying that there's not a recession going on right now, he's absolutely lost his mind. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, the narrative towards the soft landing has changed so much in the last 8 weeks, because just 2 months ago, nobody thought Powell could engineer anything like this. And here we are. It's very hard to call this a recession when you've got full employment.
Okay, for one thing, that's absolutely flawed, because a recession is not caused by unemployment. A recession causes unemployment. Whenever we go into recession, then we're going to start seeing people cut their employees, and they're going to be laying people off, and that's how an unemployment is going to start going up. And we're going to have to get to 5% or higher unemployment for inflation to actually start coming down and not to be sticky. We'll get into the inflation reading here in just a moment.
Look what happened in July. You've got maybe half of this year's returns came in 4 days. And so if you weren't in the market, you didn't capture that upside. And so it's impossible to time the market. You would have never guessed July would have been a good month.
That's true, but the only reason why most of those gains were made in the 4 days in July is because those were really the only gains that were made this year. If you weren't in the market for the whole year, you would have missed out on most of the dumps, and you would still be pretty much ahead. If you were in the market for those 4 days that he's talking about in July, then yeah, you would have made a little bit of money, but you would still be way down because you would have been holding on through the whole beginning of this year while we were doing nothing but dumping. I really like Kevin O'Leary, but I don't care how many Wikipedia articles you change, we are definitely in a recession, because 2 negative quarters of GDP is the technical definition of a recession. As you can see by this article on Investopedia, we did add 528,000 jobs in July, but that's just because a bunch of people are having to take second jobs to deal with the rise in prices. The Fed's supposed mandate is to keep inflation around 2% and to keep the unemployment rate under 5%. Until it looks like inflation is going to be going down to about 2% or be headed that direction, and the Fed has said this in his meetings in the past, they are going to have to continue raising rates, and until unemployment does go above 5%, they're not going to be hitting the other side of their mandate and have to actually lower interest rates to deal with the unemployment side of things. Also, because of all of these people taking on multiple jobs, whenever the recession does start to take a toll and people have to lose their jobs, it's not going to show up in the unemployment rate, because they're still going to be technically employed if they do hold on to one of those jobs. So while you might see non-farm payrolls going down, you're not going to be seeing unemployment come down, because those people are going to be just losing one job, but they're still going to be technically employed because they still have one of the 2 jobs that they have to deal with right now. Also, because gas has been coming down recently, that means that people might have a little bit extra money to spend on other things, which is basically adding to core inflation. And that means that inflation could be stickier than we're actually thinking it will be, meaning that the Fed will have to continue raising those rates, and just because inflation has peaked doesn't mean that he's actually going to get to turn around and start cutting things. And if the economy is doing so well, then tell me why everybody's having to rack up that credit card debt. This article right here says that American household debt is at all-time highs, and that's because people are still having to deal with this inflation. That doesn't mean that inflation has peaked. That means that this is still a real big problem for people. But you wouldn't know it listening to Biden over here. Listen to this guy talk.
Before I begin today, I want to say a word about the news that came out today relative to the economy. Actually, I just want to say a number. 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation.
0 inflation? Are you freaking kidding me? You tell me, are you feeling any pain from inflation? Because I sure am. That's just insulting, and these people are absolutely out of touch. If he doesn't think that people are struggling with inflation right now, then he's absolutely insane. What he's referring to is this July month-over-month reading. It says 0%, and that's just because really gas was so outlandishly expensive recently, and it came down just enough to balance out all the rest of the stuff that went up with inflation. If it wasn't for gas coming down, then we would still be seeing a higher than expected reading on inflation. And this is headline inflation, which apparently, according to the Fed, it doesn't really matter, because rises in price of gas and food doesn't really affect you, isn't that right? Listen to what the Fed has to say.
So I guess I'd start by saying we've been saying we would move expeditiously to get to the range of neutral, and I think we've done that now. We're at 2.25 to 2.5, and that's right in the range of what we think is neutral. So
First of all, if inflation last month was at 9.1%, do they really think that whatever 2.5% is going to be enough to tackle that insane amount of inflation, which is actually way higher than that because they really just cooked those books? No way, dude.
Of course, we'll be looking closely at inflation. You mentioned headline and core. Our mandate is for headline. Of course, it's not for core, but we look at core because core is actually a better indicator of headline and of all inflation going.
So he says that headline is just basically a made-up number because core is a better indicator of what headline is. That doesn't really make any sense. But okay, let's look at core inflation if that's what you want, Mr. Powell. Core inflation is this stuff down here highlighted in green. And as you can see, this is basically everything except for food and energy. And since energy is what brought inflation down to 0 month over month, you can see that core inflation is actually still on the rise. That means that the Fed is going to have to continue raising these rates, and that's not going to be a good look for stocks and for cryptocurrency. I don't think that just because we saw this month over month inflation come in at 0%, that means that we're getting ready for the Fed to do a pivot. But we do have about a month left until the next Fed meeting and until they announce their next hike. Also, we have another CPI reading coming out next month before the Fed meeting, and that means that if inflation does continue to rise in that CPI reading, then we are definitely going to be expecting a more hawkish Fed than what people are apparently expecting right now at this moment. Until then, though, people do think that the Fed is going to be pivoting, so we could see a bull market rally that lasts up until possibly even September. And then whenever the Fed shocks everybody and doesn't lower rates or doesn't pause the rate hikes like everybody's kind of expecting them to, then they're going to be shocked and we're going to probably have a big retracement again. That's just my opinion. But if Bitcoin doesn't get up here and start making some higher highs, then I don't know if that's even going to start happening, because as you can see, the RSI is overbought here on the hourly chart, and that means that we could be seeing a retracement here from the pump that we saw from the release of the CPI readings. And if it doesn't make a higher low right here, then that could be disappointing and be sending us down for a retracement before we start hopefully trying to find some support here around 20,000. If we do make a higher high right here though, then I think we could be seeing a bear market rally hopefully up until September, and then I'm going to be really looking to see what those CPI readings are going to be saying to see if we actually are going to be seeing a more dovish Fed, or if they're going to be actually continuing hikes like I think that they're going to be doing. But until I see some definitive facts and some real actual statistics that show that inflation is coming down to a sustainable level and not being sticky, then I think that the Fed is going to have to continue doing what they're doing right now, and that's not going to be a good look for the market. Finally, I just want to close things off by saying that we're not technically in a bull market until this chart gets over the 200-day moving average, and that's facts, just like 2 negative quarters of GDP is technically a recession. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and don't forget to hit that like button. I'll see you next time. Bye.